And Kyroot said, there is both a collective secondary world and an individual one. And while the former has no last page, the latter seems to, which is what drives men to want to believe otherwise. How can anybody request additional information for that? The secondary world by its very nature, that is the world wherein man continues to grow, the world wherein that you could even opine and poetically that life continues, the gods continue to engage in creation by way of man. There cannot be a last page. But if there does not appear to be a last page, what would happen to ordinary man's minds? Let's take a guess. Just one of those flying fortress guesses and go, would they get confused more than they are? Hey, that sounds good. What if they decided, which would be worse? The ordinary men decided, like many of them do, that yes, it may be at least theoretically true that I too, yes me, will die. I mean physically, but I happen to be a Presbyterian, and therefore I do not expect to actually die. Not the kind of money I have turned into this church. I know all that sounds good, but those of you that are beginning to understand the physical nature of a polar-based universe also understand those who believe in life after death. They're playing coin flipping, not just with that, with everything. That is, those who believe in life after death, those same people constitute 50% of the people in the world who do not believe in life after death. Now, the people who believe in life after death, of course, will deny that. And I have personally, I know that I'm with some of you, I am so busy with the part-time job that I do not have time to thrash these people and make them tell the truth. Plus, I do not have the wherewithal financially to prove it. You have to accept it. You have to think about it. That half the people believe anything at any particular time constitute at least 50% of those who oppose it. So those who say, well, yes, I know that everybody seems to die, but by God, I'll see Elvis in heaven. And plus, maybe even my mother if I get around to it. The only reason that people believe in anything, the only reason that energy takes on a name of any sort is because you've got a man coming along. He's way down here in the Kyroot. It says, stand back, please. You remember the man when he's approaching? Stand back, please. Make room for two. Here I come, and I am my own opposition. There would be nothing to say about, I'm just picking death because that seems to give many otherwise civilized, intelligent people the heebie-jeebies. And it's good for them. That's a subjective opinion. I'm sure it's not good for them. I just said that. I was trying to weasel my way out of this, that I'd already started picking on death again. And anyway, it seems to upset more people than it does to talk about the fact that San Francisco is going to move their franchise down to Tampa St. Peter. The collective secondary world, which would not exist without man's mind, etc., without him talking about it, and the individual one seems to be two different things. And what this guy was pointing out was, while the former seems to have no last page, seems to have no last page, the latter seems to, which is what makes men believe otherwise, what drives them to insist otherwise. I guess we'll try to wrap it up. How about this? At the ordinary level, when you forget death and everything else, the mind itself would not believe that there was anything, it would not try to learn anything if it did not believe that it could succeed. Now, when you get down to a very fragmented level, it appears to be true. That is, why would anyone go to school if they were advertising courses, how to pull your transmission at home? Learn to weave in your spare time at some night college. You simply would not go unless you thought they could teach it. And as far as the dance goes, once you talk to them a little bit, and you decided, yes, I've looked at it, and I have a certain amount of manual dexterity, I believe I can learn it. Or you wouldn't buy a book, How to Lose Weight in Your Spare Time, unless you thought, well, I can do this. If it says, Chapter 1, Eat Less. And you think, well, I wonder, I wonder if it goes into more detail. But. Let's try back to the curious part, because it is curious. The mind simply, and it has to do, it's not psychological and it's not trickery. It has to do, as always, God help us, the fact that we are dealing with what seems to be a three-dimensional reality, which is not important, but it's the only one we got here. But to drive it, all it takes also is the appearance of two-dimensional energy, polar-based energy of all natures, all stripes and even polka dotsies. The mind would not attempt to do anything. The energy that drives the human mind, which is not that much different than that which drives a bus. Not a Trailways, but a Greyhound, some decent line. It's the same kind of energy. If the mind did not believe that it could figure out something, that it could learn something, all right, I'll read this book, I'll take this course. A bus would not leave going from St. Louis to Topeka unless it thought it would get there. The mind would not do it unless it thought it could get there. But then the subtle, curious part is, if you ask the mind in a certain way, which is not important, I'm just trying to get you to see it, that, all right, do you think that you'll actually get somewhere and be satisfied? I mean, if we put together our money, get you a ticket, and let you take this course in weaving, or put you on the bus and send you to Topeka, will you finally shut the hell up and quit driving us crazy? Will you be happy if we move you to Kansas? And the mind knows, just an ordinary person. I'm sure they'll say yes to get a free trip. But it knows that it won't be. Because it also knows that if there was an end page, it would be the big D, not Dallas. No. We're not talking about moving on southwest. You know what we're talking about. It would know, hey, that's the end. They have pulled the plug on my little swinging machine. And Kyroot said, this is sort of a pickup from last time, if you recall, that the Kyroot, well, I'll read this and then I'll remind you, assuming I can remember it too, of last time. And Kyroot said, a train in motion can always be, are you ready, metamorphosized. In fact, it can't be described otherwise. The last time that we met, many of you had bad haircuts. Now, last time we met, there was a Kyroot that pointed out that completed works do not have to deal in metaphors. And we just sort of hit it and kicked at it a few times. I would suggest that you could get something worthwhile out of that, but it is, again, one of these great ones that if you talk about it much, you haven't just sort of kicked it and fondled it or shined it. You kill it, because it's the very thing that you can't talk about. It would seem, when somebody is good at something, all the way from philosophers to poets, those that just historically, you don't have to take it in any strange sense, but those who are recognized as literary giants, beacons, standing on the intellectual hills and shores of life, that history still recognizes, they all, without exception, dealt in what? Metaphors. Well, or symbolism. Some of it can apparently actually be about seasons and love and honoring your fellow man. But even those who read it, if they do not sit and analyze it specifically, all of you are sharp enough, it's no great intellectual shakes, to realize, all right, there is more to it. All religions, all the Vedamikams, all the religious writings, those that purport to be metaphorical, certainly are metaphorical. But I'm telling you, when you get down to levels, and I didn't make up this, but you get down to levels that, or to areas that on one level could appear to be a fairly crude fairy tale, a story like Gulliver's Travels, then I'm sure plenty of men, I'm not about to start, it's a waste of time, but you can do it yourself, and you can go, hey, that's no little fairy tale. Or the Brothers Grimm. I'm not sure how much they pouted, because some of those stories are funny as hell, that seem to be about wolves eating up people. But I assure you that people like Papa Freud sit around and went, wolves there, and then had to look in the closet and look under his couch. Then tried to look into his own mind. Then he decided, yes, I'm the woodcutter. He called it that instead of a king. You didn't lose your place. Anything that seems to be worthwhile in life, but not my definition, life's definition, history, all literature, everything that's been spoken. Nowadays, of course, been spoken is down on paper or hard disk drive somewhere. But anything that's respected, that anybody respects, I won't question it, is metaphorical at the very least. Very likely symbolic. But it's metaphorical, and it takes no great brains if somebody says, well, I don't read philosophy, I'm not interested in metaphysics, I'm not interested in religion. And you find out, all right, they read detective stories. And you could talk to them just a few minutes if they're just reasonably intelligent and listen, and you could say, well, all right. And they start describing the latest plot, whatever their best one and it's something about a man that is currently, I'm just making it up, I don't know any novels, but it's about sexual harassment in the workplace. We were taping this circa summer of '92, and it's a hot item. And we tie it in, and then one woman decides to take vengeance into her own hands, and actually it goes beyond the mere harassment, and this man in the office or in her workplace begins to physically abuse her, and she finally has to fight back, and she hits him with a bumper. Let's say they work in a General Motors plant. She picks up a bumper of a car and bumps him off. You could talk to an ordinary person just for a few minutes, and you could say, well, now wait a minute. It sounded like a murder story. See, I've already thrown in the rest, but let's assume that she just described it to you, or he did. Somebody said, I like this, and you murder mystery, and you said, well, tell me the plot of the latest one, and they told you that, and you said, all right. And they just told you, well, this man and woman working the place, and he keeps trying to put the hitting on her, and she keeps saying no, and finally he gets abusive, and he kills her, or she kills him, and you say, wait a minute. All right, I hadn't read the thing, but just what you said, in this day and time, that's almost, I didn't think about it. Maybe I should read detective stories, and you could tell the person that's relayed the plot. Up to that point, you say, that's a damn metaphor for what's going on in society now. And you could get quite ordinary people to go, yeah, you're right. I mean, just like that. They'll go, yeah, you understand that. But then, what I'm trying to drag you to, then, quite ordinary civilized people would say, that it is a higher order of literature, or at least it's a higher order of interpretation and analysis, and it takes a special writer. They would start trying to apply it either to the nouns or the verbs, the action or the actor. They'd say, or it takes a special kind of type of person, if not a specific person, a certain type of person to write not just crude novels, not just crude detective stories, not even just cheap fortune cookie philosophy, but it has to be people of greater vision. It has to be people of more insightful thought processes that can write something and it actually be metaphorical. All right, you understand that. Now here's the point. Once you can understand the reality behind a two-dimensional drive of this, is that it's impossible to describe anything without being metaphorical. It's just that everyday levels it doesn't seem to count, and down to very specific levels, of course, it doesn't count. If somebody says, what time is it, and you say 7 o'clock, I'm assuming if you don't get in a fist fight, that you don't tell some guy, especially bigger than you, maybe that's having a few beers, and he says, what time is it, and you say 7 o'clock, and he's late for a date or something, and he starts out the door, and you said, by the way, I was being metaphorical. Or maybe he takes off, and he finds out you told him the wrong time, and he comes back later, and you say, wait a minute, I was just speaking metaphorically. Well, but other than that, the point is, in any meaningful way, to try and verbally limn what's going on in life, to draw any sort of verbal, intellectual picture of life, you have to speak metaphorically. Because it would have to be something that was absolutely complete. And as I said, if you catch a glimpse, we can't really speak of this because I can't tell you something complete. I can tell you people's dreams, but anything else that you describe that's alive, it's incomplete. And therefore, you have no choice. It's not whether, well, should I just go ahead and describe what's going on here in just a straightforward narrative manner? Or wait a minute, I prefer to be thought of as important, maybe get published in the Parish Review instead of the local, pay us $10 and we'll publish your story in a poetry magazine, Incorporated. No, if I'm going to be somebody and recognize I got to turn this into a metaphor, you got no choice. It may be so bad that nobody pays any attention, but you cannot describe an incompleted work without speaking metaphorically. It's not a matter of, well, I'm not even sure I understand how to write and to speak metaphorically. That's because you're not complete. I was going to suggest we can't talk about something complete. if I was going to play my own Kyroot and say, well, then a kid or somebody in the audience says, well, tell us what is complete. Name it. Put a name on it. And you can't. Everything that you talk about that is alive is incomplete. And therefore it must be spoken of metaphorically. That if it's not complete, you can't say, all right, this is that. Because it's not really that. Because no matter what you say, you can say, this is my best friend, or this is my wife, or this is my husband. And they love me more than anything in the world. I don't give anybody the blues. But anything you figure out, you can say, this is my employee and he is faithful to me. But you can speak on wife or anybody, and if you try to say something absolutely, or say, this is my brother. This is my son. He works in the business, and I would trust him. That's the benefit of having a family to take over the business. I would trust him completely. Somebody's going to say, have you ever seen him around the cash register when you're not here? I don't hear that. There is no such thing as to speak absolutely, non-metaphorically about anything that is still a work in progress. And for someone, if I was going to do my own Kyroot, and a man in the audience says, well, tell us what is then, Mr. Smart Aleck. You can't. But I was going to suggest I can point at where men try to, which you surely can yourself. It's a great range. It varies from somewhere like God to death, which is what makes them such popular cocktail centers of conversation, because they are apparently getting close to what is not a work in progress. That if you would lend your ear to those who are apparently speaking for the gods and the forces, what do they love to do? Constantly. They are absolute murder on metaphors. They keep talking about the omnipotent, the all-knowing, the all-powerful, the non-metaphorical. No, we're not speaking metaphorical when we talk about our God. All-powerful, yeah, I heard that. No, all-knowing, yes. Can't make a mistake. Yeah, got it. We got 4 minutes to do 50 pages. No, we don't. There's not 50 pages in the world. And I just said that metaphorically. Of course, that's getting closer to one of the things that's not metaphorical, which is what? Numbers. Well, they could be, according to how you take them. Take mine straight up. Well, I'll read this one, but it's obviously self-evident. Somebody just wanted to hear it again. A letter from a viewer, quote, it seems to me that what you're saying is that you can either take life with a certain kind of melancholy, or else you can just treat it as just some kind of joke. And then Kyroot noted that this guy is obviously watching our show on a black and white set. All right, the addendum. Does anybody ever figure, I never had anybody write in and say, are these addendums and stuff, are they actually connected to the main body of the letter? Or did you just cut them up and that slash and burn kind of technique and paste them together? Maybe next week, maybe next time somebody will write and ask us that. But you're too late. I already asked it for you. The addendum says, one rebel publishing house fired all of the authors and hired nothing but a stable of editors. Kyroot meant by editors, literally editors. The ones with the red pencil to go through and... But think about it. No writers, no more authors. But a full house, a full continuum, a full company, editors. 2 minutes. Here we go. Do-do-do. And Kyroot said, I know this is hard because Kyroot made up the word here in the end of the sentence. It's poetry size. You understand? And Kyroot said, the crasser the emotions, the more men are moved to poeticize it. What do men really rhapsodize about? Which is a synonym. Kyroot couldn't resist poeticize. But rhapsodize, I assume, unless someone has a thesaurus that they can throw at me and prove me wrong, would be a reasonable synonym. But what do men rhapsodize about? And at first you might think, or you might want to answer, well, love, romance, the gods, decency. Think about it. They actually want to rhapsodize about the cruder, the crasser parts of man's being. I could jump on religion and romance because it ends up, what are all the poems about by and large? Whining about lost love or how I got mistreated. And if you don't want to step into that kind of erotic ditch, and if you were more of a turn of mind to look toward the religious horizon, you could say, well, now wait a minute, when we start talking about the religious works of all of humanity, then there is an exception. When we start talking about the goodness, the all not goodness of the gods. Think about it. That sounds nice to say our God, well, Christianity says God is love. And I guess somewhere in the Bible it must say that. But you and I surely know enough, all of you childhood heathens. What are the main descriptions of God and Jehovah in the Western world and all worlds? A pissed son of a bitch. Well, according to the story, they set the story just right, though. The first book of the Bible, the way the great English editors, if you recall, put the Bible together under the auspices of our ever-favorite King James. They put it together and it starts right off setting the stage to explain why the man is mad. He started right off, gave you heaven on earth, the Garden of Eden, asked just one or two simple things. Don't piss in the sink and don't eat off that tree. Are we on audio? Oh, well, if Oral Roberts or Billy Graham's watching this again, don't write me. I know you get upset, but don't take it seriously. Jesus, it's just show business, just like you. You just don't know. Well, no, just a joke. Just a joke.